My name is Aria Jones, and I never thought a single moment could unravel everything I'd built my life around. It was a quiet evening in our Seattle apartment, the kind where the city's hum felt distant, and I thought I'd finally done something right. I slid a custom photo album across the dinner table to Charles, my husband of 10 years. My hands trembled with anticipation, but my smile was wide. "Happy anniversary," I said softly, watching his face for a spark of joy. "Seriously, Aria?" Charles muttered, barely glancing at the album before tossing it aside like it was junk mail. My chest tightened, the air catching in my throat. "What is this? A bunch of old photos glued together? This is the best you could do." His voice dripped with disdain, each word a jab at the weeks I'd spent curating memories, our first date at Pike Place Market, the rainy camping trip where we laughed until dawn, the day we moved into this apartment. I'd poured my heart into every page, hoping to remind him of us. "I thought you'd like something meaningful," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Growing up, my parents' fights taught me to keep the peace, to make others happy even when it hurt. I'd carried that into our marriage, always trying to be the wife Charles wanted. "It's us, Charles. Everything we've built." He rolled his eyes, leaning back in his chair. "Built? Aria, this sentimental stuff is pointless. You're always so emotional. It's exhausting." His words stung, echoing the doubts I'd buried since I was a kid, watching my mom beg my dad to care. I clenched my hands under the table, fighting the urge to shrink. I'd spent years designing logos and campaigns for clients, channeling my creativity into our life, but Charles always saw it as lesser than his flashy tech sales career. Tonight, I'd hoped he'd see me. Instead, his dismissal felt like a door slamming shut. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding. "Charles, I did this for us," I said, my voice trembling now. "For our future." But his smirk told me he wasn't listening. And in that moment, I realized the album wasn't just a gift, it was my last attempt to hold on to something that was already slipping away. Charles stood up, running a hand through his hair, his face twisted with impatience. "You don't get it, do you, Aria?" he said, his voice sharp enough to slice through the quiet of our Seattle apartment. "This isn't working anymore. You're not working anymore." My stomach lurched like I'd missed a step in the dark. I stared at him, my mind racing to catch up. "What are you saying?" I asked, though a part of me already knew. He crossed his arms, a smug edge to his smile. "I'm leaving you, Aria. I've met someone else, Mary. She's 23, vibrant, and she knows how to live, not just exist like you do." The name Mary hit like a slap. I'd heard him mention her before, a new hire at his tech firm, always with a laugh or a too long story. But this was betrayal dressed in his usual arrogance. "You're leaving me?" I repeated, my voice shaking but holding steady. "After everything I've done for us?" He laughed, cold and dismissive. "Everything? You mean clinging to me with your little projects? I need someone who adds something real to my life, not drags me down with this emotional baggage." Each word was a knife, cutting into the part of me that had always feared I wasn't enough. Growing up, I'd watched my mom fade under my dad's criticism, and I'd sworn I'd never let that happen to me. Yet here I was, my heart sinking as Charles echoed those same wounds. I thought of the years I'd dimmed my own light, taking freelance gigs to support his career, moving to Seattle for his job, always putting his dreams first. I'd believed we were a team, but to him, I was just a shadow. "So this is how you tell me?" I asked, my voice low. "By throwing away 10 years like it's nothing?" He shrugged, unfazed. "You're too much, Aria. Always have been." I sat there, the photo album lying discarded between us, and felt the weight of his words settle in. But beneath the hurt, something else stirred, a flicker of resolve I didn't know I had. I looked at Charles, his smug grin burning into me, and something snapped. Instead of crumbling, I started to laugh, a real, unstoppable laugh that echoed through our Seattle apartment. It wasn't bitter or forced, it was the sound of clarity breaking through years of doubt. Charles's eyes narrowed. "What's so funny?" he demanded, his confidence wavering. I stood, picking up the photo album he'd tossed aside. "You don't even know what you're throwing away," I said, my voice steady now. I flipped to the back page, my fingers brushing the hidden pocket I'd sewn in. With a calm I didn't know I possessed, I pulled out a folded deed and held it up. This, I said, is the deed to a lake house on Lake Chelan. I bought it for us, Charles. A surprise for our anniversary. His jaw dropped, the smugness vanishing as his eyes locked on the paper. You bought a house, he stammered, his voice cracking. I'd saved for years, taking extra freelance design gigs, pouring my heart into a dream of quiet weekends by the lake, just the two of us. I'd imagined it as our reset, a place to rebuild what we'd lost. But now it was mine alone. I slipped the deed into my purse, my smile sharp. Looks like Mary won't be sipping wine by the lake, will she? Charles's face twisted, shock, panic, regret all colliding. Since when do you make decisions like that? He asked, grasping for control. I tilted my head, my heart pounding with newfound strength. Since I realized I can't rely on you to care about our future, Charles. I thought we wanted the same things. My mistake. He opened his mouth, but no words came. For the first time, he saw me, not the wife who'd always bent to his will, but the woman who'd built something extraordinary without his permission. You're making a mistake, he finally said, but his voice lacked conviction. I shook my head. No, Charles. You made yours. With that, I turned and walked toward the bedroom, the deed in my purse feeling like a lifeline to a future I was ready to claim. I moved through our Seattle apartment like a ghost, packing a small duffel bag with clothes and essentials. Charles's voice still echoed in my head, his dismissal of the album, his cruel words about Mary. Each memory stung, but as I zipped the bag, a weight began to lift. I paused by the dresser, my eyes catching on our wedding photo. We'd been so young, so full of hope, standing under a canopy of cherry blossoms in Portland. I'd spent years chasing that version of us, molding myself into the wife Charles wanted, quiet, supportive, invisible. But that Aria was gone. I grabbed the photo and tucked it into the bag, not out of sentiment, but as a reminder. I wasn't running from the past, I was choosing to leave it behind. Charles's footsteps paced the living room, his muttered excuses trailing through the walls. I didn't care. For the first time, his chaos wasn't my problem. I slung the bag over my shoulder and walked out, brushing past him without a glance. You're really leaving, he snapped, his voice a mix of disbelief and irritation. You're being dramatic, Aria. I stopped at the door, turning to face him. His arms were crossed, his jaw tight, but I saw the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Dramatic? I said, my voice calm. No, Charles. I'm done being the punchline in your story. I stepped outside, the Seattle night air cool against my skin. As I drove away, the city lights blurred through my tears, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were relief, raw and unfiltered. I headed to Rachel's house in Capitol Hill, her cozy bungalow a haven I hadn't realized I needed. Growing up, I'd learned to hide my pain, to keep the peace at all costs. But tonight, I didn't want to hide. I wanted to be seen. When Rachel opened the door, her dark eyes scanned my face, reading everything in an instant. What did he do? She asked, her voice low but fierce. I managed a small smile. Can I come in? I said, my heart steady despite the ache. This was the first step toward something new, and I was ready to take it. Rachel waved me into her Capitol Hill bungalow, the warm glow of her kitchen wrapping around me like a hug. Kitchen or couch? She asked, already reaching for a bottle of Pinot Noir. Kitchen, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. We settled at her small oak table, the kind of place where secrets were spilled and hearts were mended. Rachel poured 2 glasses, her eyes never leaving mine. Spill, she said, leaning back with a mix of concern and readiness to fight for me. I took a deep breath, the words tumbling out, the photo album, Charles's cruel dismissal, his announcement about Mary, the lake house deed. My voice cracked as I recounted his words, you're not working anymore, but I pushed through, the weight of the night pouring out. Rachel's jaw dropped when I got to the lake house. You bought a house on Lake Chelan? And he had no idea, she said, her voice rising with indignation. And then he calls you pointless? That man's got some nerve. I swirled the wine in my glass, a bitter smile tugging at my lips. That's Charles. Always so sure I'd just take it. Rachel shook her head, her dark hair catching the light. She'd been through her own divorce, clawing her way to independence while raising her son. She knew what it was to rebuild. But you didn't take it, she said, a grin breaking through. You walked out with that deed and left him speechless. Arya, that's power. Her words lit something inside me. Growing up, I'd learned to shrink, to make myself small to keep the peace. But tonight, with Rachel across from me, I felt seen, not as Charles's wife, but as Arya, the woman who dared to dream big. What now? Rachel asked, her hand over mine. I shrugged, the future a blank canvas. I don't know. I've spent so long trying to make him happy, I forgot what I want. She squeezed my hand. You'll figure it out. But tonight, you stay here. No arguments. I smiled, the warmth of her friendship grounding me. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. The next morning, my phone buzzed relentlessly on Rachel's coffee table, Charles's name lighting up the screen, 8 missed calls, a dozen texts. Where are you? This is childish, Arya. We need to talk. I stared at the messages, each one a desperate grab for control. Last night, he'd walked away from me without a second thought. Now he was unraveling. Rachel peeked over my shoulder, sipping her coffee. Let me guess, Charles is losing it? I nodded, a bitter laugh escaping. He's not used to me saying no. I ignored his texts, spending the day with Rachel, running errands through Seattle's bustling streets. It felt good to focus on something normal, grabbing groceries, laughing over her stories about her son's soccer games. But by evening, when I returned to our apartment, Charles's car was in the driveway. My heart raced, but I parked on the street, steeling myself. Inside, he was pacing the living room, his face a mix of anger and desperation. You finally showed up, he snapped, his voice sharp. I live here, I said calmly, setting my purse on the counter. What are you doing here? He softened his tone, a tactic I knew too well. This has gotten out of hand, Arya. We need to talk. I folded my arms, leaning against the counter. Out of hand? You mean because I didn't beg you to stay after you chose Mary? His jaw tightened, and for a moment, I saw the Charles I'd fallen for, charming, persuasive. But I wasn't that girl anymore. Look, I messed up, he said, running a hand through his hair. I wasn't thinking. We can fix this. I laughed, the sound sharp and freeing. Fix this? Charles, you spent years dismissing me, taking me for granted. This isn't a quick fix. You made your choice. His eyes flickered with panic, but I felt steady, rooted in the strength I'd found last night. You're blowing this out of proportion, he tried, but I cut him off. No, you don't get to rewrite this story. I grabbed my bag and headed upstairs, leaving him standing there, his words falling flat. For the first time, I wasn't just walking away, I was standing tall. The next day, I moved with purpose. I packed Charles's clothes, books, and gadgets into boxes, stacking them neatly by the front door of our Seattle apartment. Each item felt like shedding a layer of the life I'd clung to, the one where I'd tried to be enough for him. By afternoon, I'd called a locksmith to change the locks, the click of the new deadbolt a small victory. I wasn't just closing a door, I was reclaiming my home. When Charles showed up that evening, his usual swagger was back, as if he could charm his way inside. I met him on the porch, holding a folder with my lawyer's contact information. His eyes flicked to the suitcase by the door. What's this? He asked, his tone sharp. Your things, I said, gesturing to the pile. And this is my lawyer's number. You'll hear from her soon. His face hardened, but I stood firm, my heart steady despite the storm in his eyes. You're being ridiculous, Arya, he said, stepping closer. You can't handle this alone. You need me. His words were a last-ditch jab, the kind he'd used to keep me small. But I wasn't small anymore. I'd grown up smoothing over my parents' fights, always the peacemaker, but I was done playing that role. We'll see about that, I said, my voice calm but unyielding. Now get off my porch. He stared at me, his confidence cracking like thin ice. For years, I'd let his charm and criticism define me, but not anymore. I'd saved for that lake house, built a dream he couldn't even see, and now I was building a life without him. He grabbed his suitcase, muttering under his breath, and stalked off into the Seattle dusk. As his car disappeared, I stepped back inside, the quiet of the apartment wrapping around me like a promise. This was my space now, and I was ready to fill it with something real, something mine. 2 weeks later, my phone buzzed while I was sketching at Rachel's kitchen table, a new design project taking shape. Charles's name flashed on the screen, and I almost ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me. "What do you want?" I answered, my tone cool. His voice was tight, frayed at the edges. "It's Mary," he said, bitterness seeping through. "She's gone." I leaned back, a spark of satisfaction flickering in my chest. "She laughed at me," he spat, the words rushing out. "Called me weak, said I threw away the best thing I had, you, the lake house, everything." She couldn't believe I let it all slip away. I bit my lip, fighting a smile. The man who'd called my efforts pointless was now tasting his own medicine. "And now you're calling me because?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. Growing up, I'd learned to hide my anger, to swallow hurt, but this moment felt different, like justice. "I messed up, Arya," he said, his voice dropping. "Can we just talk? Please?" I could hear the desperation, the same charm he'd used to keep me tethered for years. But I wasn't that girl anymore. "No, Charles," I said, my heart light. "You chose your path. Live with it." I hung up before he could respond, the silence that followed wrapping around me like a victory. Mary had seen through him, just as I finally had. His world was unraveling, but mine was just beginning. I leaned back over my sketch, the lines flowing freer now. Rachel walked in, catching the grin on my face. "What's got you smiling?" she asked. I told her about Charles's call, and she burst out laughing. "Karma's fast these days," she said, raising her coffee mug. I nodded, feeling the weight of years of doubt lift. Charles's downfall wasn't my joy, my freedom was. For the first time, I wasn't looking back, only forward, to the life I was building, one bold stroke at a time. The divorce papers were signed, and with a final pen stroke, Charles was out of my life. I moved into the Lake Chelan house, its cedar walls and wide windows framing a view that felt like a fresh start. Seattle's buzz was behind me, replaced by the quiet ripple of the lake and the whisper of pines. I'd bought this place dreaming of a future with Charles, but now it was my sanctuary, a space to rediscover the Arya I'd buried under years of his criticism. I threw myself into freelance design, taking on clients who valued my work, logos for local startups, branding for a winery near the lake. Each project was a step toward rebuilding the confidence Charles had chipped away. I started painting again, something I'd loved in college but abandoned when he called it frivolous. The lake's colors, deep blues, fiery sunsets, flowed onto my canvas, each brushstroke a rebellion against the voice that had told me I wasn't enough. Rachel visited often, her laughter filling the house. "This place is you," she said one weekend, sprawling on the couch with a glass of wine. "It's got your heart." She was right. Growing up, I'd learned to make myself small, to keep the peace at home. But here, I was expansive, free to fill the space with my dreams. I joined a local art group, made new friends who didn't know the old, timid Arya, and leaned on Rachel's fierce belief in me. One evening, as I sat on the deck sketching the lake's horizon, I realized I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. The house wasn't just a symbol of what I'd lost, it was proof of what I'd built. Charles's shadow was gone, and in its place was a life I was proud of, one I'd created on my own terms. The doubts that used to creep in at night, had I done the right thing, were quiet now, replaced by a certainty that I was exactly where I belonged. 6 months after I walked away from Charles, I stood on the deck of my Lake Chelan house, the lake shimmering under a sunset of orange and pink. I'd launched Jones Designs, my own studio, and the work poured in clients who saw my vision, projects that lit me up. One day, an email arrived, an invitation to speak at a Seattle design conference about my journey as an entrepreneur. My first instinct was fear. Charles used to mock my nervous stumbles during conversations, but I pushed it aside. This was my story, and I was ready to tell it. Preparing the keynote was intense, but Rachel kept me grounded. "Tell it raw," she said. "The heartbreak, the hustle, all of it." The day of the conference, I stood backstage, heart pounding, but when I stepped onto the stage, the words flowed. My name is Aria Jones, I began, and a year ago, I was defined by someone else's expectations. Today, I'm here because I chose myself. I shared it all. The album, Charles's Betrayal, the lake house, and how Jones' designs rose from the ashes of a life I'd outgrown. The audience leaned in, nodding, some wiping tears. I felt my voice matter. Afterward, a woman approached me, her eyes bright. "Your story gave me hope," she said. "It's never too late to start over." Her words stayed with me as I drove back to the lake, the road winding through pines. Sitting on my deck that night, I thought about the journey, the pain of Charles's words, the triumph of walking away, the joy of rebuilding. He was a memory now, his texts long deleted, his voice silent. I didn't need his approval or anyone's. I'd built a life I loved, one bold step at a time. To everyone who's followed this journey, thank you. You've walked with me through heartbreak, defiance, and victory. If my story stirred something in you, hit that subscribe button and join us. Every design, every sunset, every new beginning tells a story of courage and heart. Keep chasing your own truth, and I'll meet you by the lake.